What if the person who saved your life mid-flight was the same person your system had already sentenced to silence? When Amira Dalton, a calm, soft-spoken ER nurse and widowed black mother of two, boarded a routine flight with her children, she expected nothing more than turbulence and overpriced snacks. But when an elderly man collapsed near row 9 and no one moved fast enough, her instincts kicked in. She saved him, quietly, fully, and then she sat back down. But what Amira didn't know was that the man she saved held the keys to a billion-dollar secret that could shake the foundation of modern healthcare. What happens when one mother's compassion exposes a silent algorithm killing people behind hospital walls? Why did the crew hesitate to believe her credentials but rush to take credit when cameras rolled? And how far will the system go to suppress the truth? When the truth has a name, a family, and a heartbeat. If you've ever doubted whether one person can change everything, this story is for you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Now, let's begin the story of Amira Dalton and the flight that rewrote history. The announcement echoed overhead, calm, sterile, routine. Flight 728 to London. Heathrow is now boarding all passengers in Group 3. Please have your boarding pass and passport ready. Amira Dalton pulled her daughter closer by the shoulder strap of her tiny pink backpack and turned to her son. "Jalen, bag check." "One more time." Jalen sighed, mock exasperated. "Mom, I've got my boarding pass, passport, and phone. I double-checked while you were in the line at Hudson News." Amira looked him over. He was taller than she remembered just a month ago. At 14, Jalen was somewhere between boyhood and the edge of becoming a man, full of quiet questions and sudden silences. The same silence she often carried herself. Mira, her 7-year-old daughter, tugged on her sleeve. "Can I hold the window seat this time? Please, I want to see the clouds again." Amira smiled, even though her legs ached from the stress of getting through TSA with 2 kids, a laptop bag, and a carry-on that insisted on tipping sideways. "You can have the window on the first leg." Deal. Mira's eyes lit up. Deal. As they began walking toward the gate, Amira felt the weight of the last month settle on her shoulders again. She hadn't flown internationally since Terrence's funeral 3 years ago. He loved planes. He would read every placard, explain every button on the armrest to Jalen when he was younger, and order apple juice for Mira before she even asked. He should have been on this flight, but he wasn't. The line to board moved slowly, as usual. Business travelers shuffled in with noise-canceling headphones already on, and the usual sea of silver hard-shell luggage rolled forward like synchronized gears. An older white man in a navy sport coat was arguing with the gate agent. "I am in Group 1, he snapped, holding up his phone. "I fly this route monthly, and I've never." The gate agent nodded tightly. "Sir, I understand, but your seat is in 8C, Group 3. We're boarding by cabin today." The man turned his head, and for a brief second, his eyes locked with Amira's. Not in any meaningful way, just a passing scan of the line, but something about the man made her stomach twist. Not fear, not familiarity, more like memory scraping the edge of something she'd buried. She looked down at Mira, who was singing the alphabet softly to herself and hugging her stuffed turtle. "Shelby." Like it was sacred, Amira exhaled, deep and slow. Once they passed into the jet bridge, the air turned cooler. That strange in-between place of anticipation, where the hum of the aircraft systems met the low rustle of boarding passes and the thud of shoes on metal. Jalen leaned in. "Is it weird that I still feel nervous every time we get on a plane?" Amira glanced at him. "Even pilots feel that way. It means you respect the sky." He nodded like he understood. And maybe he did. When they stepped into the aircraft, the scent hit her lavender-scented cleaner over recycled air. Her brain automatically ran through protocols, seat location, nearest exits, water bottle check, kid safety count, EpiPen placement. They moved down the aisle toward row 14. The man from the gate, the one in the navy blazer, was in 5A, first class. Amira noticed again, briefly, that sensation tugging at her gut. But she shook it off. She never liked imagining ghosts where there were none. The flight attendants were already directing passengers to settle quickly. Mira was busy buckling her stuffed turtle into the seatbelt beside her. Jalen had claimed the aisle, headphones on, already opening his notebook to sketch something abstract. Amira sat in the middle. It was a full flight. Quiet at first, hushed and heavy, like everyone wanted to sleep, but wouldn't allow themselves the luxury. She reached into her tote and pulled out the book Terrence never finished. The bookmark was still wedged to chapter 17. She tried reading it before, many times, but never got past page 2. Today, for some reason, she opened to page 3, 20 minutes after takeoff. Mira was asleep, cheek against Amira's arm. Amira kept still, not wanting to disturb her. The plane had reached cruising altitude. Flight 728 was steady. A soft blue glow shimmered along the aisle, until the silence cracked. A woman's voice shouted, not loud, but urgent, Sir, can you hear me?" Amira turned, alert. The voice had come from row 5. There was a commotion, a gasp. Then the unmistakable sound of someone collapsing sideways in a seat. Tray tables clattered. Oxygen masks weren't down. But someone yelled, "Get a doctor." Amira unbuckled in one motion. Mom Jalen said sharply, "Stay with Mira. Don't move." She stepped into the aisle. Instinct took over. Row 5 was chaos in miniature. The man in 5A navy blazer, white dress shirt, loosened tie was slumped against the window, his face pale, lips turning gray. A woman next to him, maybe early 40s, smart clothes. Panic in her hands was trying to shake him. "I think he stopped breathing," she said to no one. Amira moved in fast. "I'm a nurse," she said clearly. "Emergency care. Let me check him." The woman didn't move. Amira's voice hardened. "Ma'am, now." The woman stood, trembling. Amira reached into her bag. "Always keep your basics." Terrence had taught her that when they were young and broke before the certifications, before the shifts in the trauma wing, pulse faint, breath shallow, pupils slow. She started chest compressions. "Someone get a flight attendant," she called out. "And find the defibrillator." Time suspended. The plane was mid-air, but her hands were solid. She could have been back in Ward C, next to a 17-year-old overdose, or a car crash victim wheeled in with no time. Count, press, breathe. Again. Suddenly his chest rose. A wheezing sound. He was back. She rolled him gently, placed him in a stable recovery position, and sat back on her heels, sweat on her forehead, her pulse louder in her own ears than his had been under her fingers. The man coughed. Then he opened his eyes, bloodshot, wild, and then, "Amira." He croaked. She froze. That voice, that tone, that name, her name. She hadn't given it. She didn't answer. "Do I know you?" He wheezed. Amira narrowed her eyes. Looked closer. Now that his face was relaxed, his wrinkles had softened into a shape she did recognize. Barely. But it was there. She had seen it behind a long mahogany bench, beneath courtroom lights, in the photograph that Terrence had circled in red ink, the week they were denied. A judge. A man who said no. A man who said her husband's medical coverage would not be honored. A technicality in writing? Denial upheld. That denial killed him. That man was right here, in front of her, dying. Or almost. Her hands had saved him. She stood slowly. "I need a moment," she said to the flight attendant who had arrived late, just as the crisis was ending. She didn't look at the man again. Instead, she walked back down the aisle, back to row 14. Jalen looked up from his sketchbook. "Are you okay?" he asked. Amira sat down. Her hands trembled now. Hours too late. Mira was still asleep. She looked at her son. I think that man used to be a judge." Jalen blinked. "Okay." She swallowed. "I think he's the one who signed the order that denied your father's final insurance claim." Jalen was silent. Then, softly, "So you saved his life." She nodded and said nothing more. For a long moment, Amira didn't move. She sat in seat 14B, back straight, hands resting in her lap like she'd forgotten how to breathe. Her fingers, once steady, skilled, trembled softly in her lap. She stared at the tray table in front of her, now lowered, untouched, across the aisle. Jalen was quiet, eyes on her face, not pressing, just present, behind them, somewhere forward in first class. The man she had just revived, the man who once sealed her family's fate, was breathing again. Because of her. Her eyes drifted downward, as if trying to find something stable in the carpeted floor of the airplane. But even the hum of the engines now felt off, untrustworthy. "Mom," Jalen finally said, voice low, "what are you going to do?" Amira didn't answer right away. What could she do? Confront him, demand an apology, ask if he even remembered. She wasn't sure what would hurt more, that he did or that he didn't. "I don't know," she whispered. Jalen nodded slowly. He didn't ask again. 30 minutes passed, maybe more. The flight attendants moved through the cabin quietly now, asking passengers if they needed anything. The mood had shifted. Everyone had seen what happened. Everyone felt it, but no one really understood. They didn't know what it cost her to move her body forward through the aisle, like it weighed 1,000 pounds, to press against the chest of the man who had signed her husband's life away, like it was just ink and obligation. To save the man who had let her husband die. Ms. Dalton. The voice startled her. She looked up. A blonde flight attendant, early 40s, kind eyes, leaned toward her with a nervous glance down the aisle. "The passenger in 5A asked if you'd be willing to speak with him when you're ready." Amira's heart thudded once. The attendant noticed. "Of course. I told him that was completely up to you. I can let him know no if you'd prefer no," Amira said, voice steady even though her stomach twisted. "I'll go." She glanced at Jalen. "Watch your sister." He nodded. Amira stood, smoothing the wrinkles from her jeans as if it mattered, as if the fabric would protect her from memory. She walked forward. Every row between 14 and 5 felt like a courtroom step. He was awake now, pale but lucid, his breathing shallow but even. He was no longer wearing his blazer, and someone had adjusted a blanket over his lap. He turned toward her as she approached, like he'd been waiting. His face, the lines around his eyes, the shape of his jaw brought it all back in fragments. That photo on the appeal letter, that one hearing where Terrence had stood beside her in his best thrift store tie, hopeful in the face of impossible odds. The judge didn't even look up when he ruled. But now, he looked up. "Amira Dalton," he said softly, like testing a name that should have been lost. She said nothing. "I remember you." Her jaw clenched. "Your husband," he added, his voice hoarse. "Terrence Dalton. He applied for the benefit extension under the Employee Emergency Care Act. I ruled on the appeal." Her lips barely moved. "You denied it." He didn't flinch, but his eyes dropped. "Just for a second." "Yes," he said quietly. Amira folded her arms, not out of confidence, but to hold herself still. "Why are you calling me forward?" she asked. "To thank me. Apologize." He inhaled shakily. "To tell you. I never forgot." She blinked. Silas Whitaker leaned back slightly, eyes dull under the cabin light. "When you live long enough," he said slowly, "you learn how memory works. You forget birthdays, appointments, things you should remember, but the ones you try to bury, they stay." Amira's face didn't soften. He looked at her directly. "Your husband died because I ruled based on policy, not people, because I read words on paper and didn't ask why someone would need 3 more weeks of coverage. I didn't ask who was behind the file number. You didn't ask because you didn't care," she said quietly. Silas didn't argue. "I've lived with it," he murmured, "and today I thought I was going to die. And when I opened my eyes, I saw you, your hands, your face, and I thought—" He stopped. She finished it for him. "You thought God was punishing you?" He let out a broken breath, half laugh, half sob. "Yes, silence." He wiped his eyes. "Ashamed. I'm not asking you to forgive me." He added, "I'm not that arrogant, but I needed to say it. Out loud. To your face. Because I never did. And because what you did today," he looked at her, eyes glassy, "was something I didn't deserve." Amira stood very still, not crying, not yelling, just standing. After a moment, she turned to walk away, but his voice stopped her. "There's more," he said. "There's something you need to know." She turned slightly. Silas reached beside him, pulled something from his briefcase, a brown envelope. Her heart stopped. It looked exactly like the one the hospital had mailed her before Terrence's death. But this one had a yellow seal. "This was never supposed to reach your husband," he said quietly. "But I kept a copy." Amira stepped forward, slowly. Her hands moved without thinking. She took the envelope. When she returned to her seat, Jalen looked up, curious, but he said nothing. He saw the envelope. He understood enough. Amira didn't open it. Not yet. Her hands weren't ready. Her mind wasn't ready. She stared out the window for a long time, watching clouds blur into vapor trails. Mira shifted in her sleep and murmured her brother's name. "Jalen." He reached over and adjusted her blanket. Then he turned to Amira. "Is that something about Dad?" Amira nodded once. Jalen looked at her seriously. "Do you want to read it alone?" She swallowed. "No, but I need a minute. Later." When Mira was awake and the cabin had settled into its long, humming lull, Amira finally opened the envelope. Inside was a single-page letter, typed, dated 4 days before Terrence's final appeal. It was a reversal notice, an approval. It was signed by an underwriter who had left the company shortly after. The ruling in their favor had been blocked, reassigned, and somehow never delivered. The court had ruled based on the absence of new documentation, because this document had been withheld, not denied, hidden. Amira's vision blurred. It was Jalen who broke the silence. "Can we do anything with that?" Amira looked at him. His eyes weren't angry, just determined. "I don't know," she whispered, "but I think someone else does." The letter sat on Amira's tray table like a ghost finally given form. Thin paper, Simple font, a line that changed everything. The claimant, Terrence Dalton, has been approved for full emergency care coverage through the end of his palliative phase. And yet, he had never known, neither of them had, because someone, a clerk, a legal aide, a bureaucrat with too many files had buried this letter, or redirected it, or let it go missing in the chaos of the appeals backlog. That piece of paper might have saved Terrence's life, or at least spared him the indignity of fighting for morphine with a credit card. Amira gripped the sides of the letter, not crumpling it, but holding it firm. Her jaw locked as the tears built pressure behind her eyes. She didn't want to cry here, not in row 14 in the middle seat, with a daughter leaning on her and a son watching her soul unravel in silence. So she swallowed it, and she breathed. Beside her, Jalen took a slow breath of his own. What does it mean Amira didn't speak at first? Her throat was dry. Then it means they changed their minds. 4 days before the appeal. But the judge never saw this. Wait, Jalen said, eyes wide. So that guy, Silas, didn't know. She finished. He ruled based on the file they gave him. But someone at the company blocked the reversal. Jalen leaned back. That's evil. Amira didn't correct him. The turbulence began subtly, just a light bump. The kind that made overhead lights sway and glasses tremble slightly. Amira barely noticed. But Mira did. Mommy, the plane is shaking. She wrapped an arm around her. It's okay, baby. It's just a bump in the air. Like driving over a little hill. Mira clung tighter to her turtle and nodded. But Amira's mind wasn't on the sky. It was back in that hospital room, in the last week of Terrence's life, when she had to choose which medication they could afford that day, when she skipped meals just to pay for his anti-nausea drip. And now, knowing it could have been covered, that someone had decided not to tell them, her stomach twisted. A ding from the seatbelt sign snapped her out of it. A flight attendant walked by briskly different from before. Younger, a little tense. He paused as he passed their row. Ms. Dalton, he asked. Amira looked up, startled. The man leaned in with a lowered voice. The gentleman in 5A requested a private conversation in the galley area when you're ready. He says it's important. Amira hesitated. Her body wanted to refuse. Her soul wanted rest. But her conscience, always louder when injustice was involved, nodded once. I'll come, she said. She found him in the front galley, sitting on the fold-down jump seat, a blanket around his shoulders and an oxygen mask hanging from his lap. Silas Whitaker looked older than she remembered, or maybe guilt aged him in fast forward. He glanced up. I thought you wouldn't come. I almost didn't, she said flatly. He nodded. I deserve that. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The plane rattled again longer this time. Silas gripped the wall beside him, then released it. I want to tell you something, he said, and I want you to hear it exactly as I remember it. Amira folded her arms. Go on. Silas's eyes drifted to the middle distance, unfocused. When your husband came to that courtroom, he didn't bring a lawyer. He didn't bring any documents I hadn't already seen. But he brought something I didn't understand until years later. Amira tilted her head. Dignity, Silas whispered. That man stood in front of a system he knew would probably fail him. And he didn't beg. He believed. He spoke about you, about your children, about the hours you worked, and how he wanted to live long enough to see Mira start kindergarten. Her breath caught. Silas continued, I told him, Mr. Dalton, I can't grant this unless new documentation is presented. And he said, then I hope one day someone in your family never needs the kindness you're refusing mine. Silence pulsed between them. I remember thinking it was just a clever line. Silas said, but now, I think it was a curse. Amira closed her eyes. I never forgot his name. Silas whispered, and when I woke up and saw your face today, he stopped. I realized the curse had come full circle, and I had a chance to undo it. Amira opened her eyes. What do you mean? He reached into his blazer pocket. Another envelope. Smaller. He handed it to her, with a trembling hand. This, he said, is the name of the attorney who leaked the reversal letter to me years later, when I demanded to audit my old rulings after retirement. She's been quietly collecting similar cases, hidden approvals, lost rulings, suppressed benefits. Amira opened it. Camille Rhodes. She's been trying to file a class action, Silas said, but she needed a case that started with the truth. Amira's mouth was dry. And I think you're the one to give it to her. When she returned to her seat, she didn't speak right away. Mira had fallen asleep again. Jalen was reading her face like a road map. He didn't ask, but Amira answered anyway. There's someone we're going to meet. A lawyer. Jalen nodded. And your father's name might clear the way for other families who were wronged. His brow furrowed. That sounds like something big. Amira exhaled. It is. Later in the flight. Mira woke and wanted to use the restroom. Amira led her to the back of the plane. On the return walk, a man across the aisle, a stranger in business attire, reached out lightly as they passed. Excuse me, he said gently. I just wanted to say thank you for what you did earlier. For that man. Amira blinked. You saw that. He nodded. A lot of us did. There was a pause. Then he said something she didn't expect. My mother died waiting for her appeal to go through. I didn't even know she had one. Amira's throat tightened. He nodded once and let her pass. She returned to her seat quietly, heart full of quiet fire. That night, as the plane dimmed and silence stretched through the cabin like a long exhale, Amira sat watching her children sleep. Terrence's voice came back to her, not in memory, not in grief, but in conviction. One day, you'll have to decide what to do with the truth. Don't let fear hold the pen. She reached for her phone, opened a new email. Subject re-inquiry for Camille Rhodes. Regarding Dalton case, the email was sent. 3 simple paragraphs. 1 attachment and image of the reversal letter and a short message from Amira Dalton. I was told you've been searching for these kinds of stories. You don't need to search anymore. You found one. Let me know if you're ready for the truth. She hit send before fear could change her mind. Then she exhaled. A quiet exhale. The kind only widows and mothers and nurses understand, one that doesn't say I'm okay, but simply, I made it through this moment. 30 rows behind her. The tension in the plane shifted again. The air didn't get heavier. It got curious. Silas Whitaker had spoken to someone else, a stewardess, then a younger man in seat 7C, then a woman in glasses who whispered after glancing back toward Amira. Eyes started to flicker toward row 14. Not all at once, not hostile, but something was building. A thread pulling tighter. Amira noticed. So did Jalen. Why are people staring at us? He asked quietly. She didn't answer at first. Then she said, because people recognize strength when they see it. Even if they don't know what it's been through. He blinked. Mira. still half asleep beside her, mumbled something about juice and her turtle, then curled tighter into Amira's side. 45 minutes later, the second voice came. She was young, early 20s, shoulder-length black curls, sharp jawline, nervous eyes. She wore a plain white hoodie and jeans with an Ivy League law school pin on the pocket. No makeup, no performance. She stopped beside Amira's row and said quietly, "Excuse me, are you Ms. Dalton?" Amira hesitated, then nodded. "I'm Elise," the woman said. "Silas Whitaker's daughter." Amira's pulse ticked once. Elise continued, voice barely above the engine hum. "I think we need to talk. If you're willing." They found an empty row near the back. Cabin lights dimmed. Elise sat first, clasping her hands. Amira sat across from her, arms folded, not defensive, just containing. "I'm not here to defend him," Elise said, looking Amira squarely in the eyes. "In fact, we haven't spoken properly in almost 4 years." Amira blinked. "You're estranged." He was. Distant after retirement, Elise said. He started disappearing into old records, rereading court files, talking about mistakes in ink. I didn't get it. I thought it was just guilt. Or age? Amira nodded slowly. Elise reached into her backpack and pulled out a thick folder. Unzipped. "My father asked me to hold this," she said, "in case he couldn't tell you himself." She opened the folder. Inside were 8 printed documents, all similar reversal letters, insurance approvals, medical coverage overrides all dated before court hearings. None had ever reached the intended families. Elise's voice broke. He wasn't just auditing his old rulings. He was uncovering a pattern. Amira's mouth went dry. Elise continued, "These letters, they were never presented to the court. They were generated, stamped, filed, but then they vanished. And now every time I try to trace them, the companies claim they were never finalized." Amira stared. Elise whispered, "They lied. To the courts, to the families, to my dad." A long silence. Then Amira asked, "Why bring them to me?" Elise's voice was soft, almost reverent, "Because my father said, you're the one person whose truth could break it open." They sat there for several minutes, not speaking, just existing in the aftermath of too much revelation. Then Amira finally said, "I'm not a lawyer. I'm not famous. I'm just a woman trying to raise 2 kids and survive the grief of a system that nearly broke me." Elise didn't flinch. "But you're still standing," she said. "And sometimes that is the most powerful thing." Back at her seat, Jalen was flipping through the airline safety pamphlet like it was a crime file. He looked up. Was that his daughter? Amira nodded. "She looks like someone who doesn't sleep much," Jalen said thoughtfully. Amira cracked the smallest smile. "That makes 2 of us." Mira, now wide awake and full of whispered energy, tugged her mother's sleeve. "Mommy, are we in trouble?" Amira kissed her forehead. "No, baby. We're just in a story that's still being written. 3 hours from landing." Turbulence hit hard. The plane dropped suddenly, sharply like it had fallen through a floor. Screams rippled through the cabin. Lights flickered, trays clattered, bags overhead shifted. Mira screamed. Jalen grabbed the armrest. Amira instinctively shielded both of them. Then the pilot's voice cut through, "Ladies and gentlemen, we've hit an unexpected pocket of air disruption. Please remain seated. Crew, secure the cabin immediately." People began to cry, not loudly, but fear took root. Amira looked at her children. Her breath became their anchor. The storm passed within 20 minutes, but something had cracked open. When it ended, The calm that followed wasn't just relief. It was silence, the kind where passengers stopped pretending they're strangers. One woman leaned across the aisle to help an elderly man with his oxygen. A child passed a toy to another child 2 rows away. Even the flight attendants looked different, less formal, more human, in that hush. Amira felt something shift in her own chest. Not closure, but space. For the first time in years, she wasn't carrying it alone. Later, after Mira had fallen asleep again and Jalen was sketching quietly on a napkin, Amira saw the email reply light up on her screen. Subject re-inquiry for Camille Rhodes regarding Dalton, case from Camille. Rhodes legal. Org-Ems. Dalton. I've waited 3 years for a message like yours. I read your attachment twice. I'll be in New York when your flight lands. I'll be waiting at the gate. Bring the letter. We are going to change everything. Amira's fingers trembled as she read it again. Not from fear, but from the overwhelming truth it was beginning. The seatbelt light chimed for the final time. The plane tilted slightly, nose dipping as descent began. A slow hush crept through the cabin, the kind of silence that feels like the inhale before a verdict. Amira adjusted Mira's hoodie, pulling the soft cotton tighter around her daughter's ears. Mira stirred slightly, but didn't wake. Jalen was silent too. Not sleeping, not reading, just watching the clouds outside. His fingers drummed lightly on the armrest, but his face was unreadable. Amira knew that face. It was Terrence's face whenever the mailman walked past their apartment without stopping. That quiet knowing, they forgot us again. And now, here they were gliding over the lights of a city that had once sent back a denial letter without a name, without a note. Just the words request declined. The landing was smoother than expected. No one clapped. But when the wheels touched down, there was an audible release from the cabin, like every person had exhaled at the same moment. The intercom buzzed. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to New York. Please remain seated until the captain turns off the seatbelt sign. The usual announcement, but it sounded different, like ritual before reckoning. As passengers stood and began to gather their belongings, Amira remained seated. She waited, breathing, watching her hands. Jalen stood first. He pulled down Mira's backpack, then reached up for his mom's carry-on without needing to be asked. 17 hours ago, he was still a boy who checked if there'd be Wi-Fi on the plane. Now he moved like a soldier in silence. Ready. Mom, he asked. Amira looked up and nodded. Yes, she said softly. Let's go meet the future. The jet bridge was cold. New York air had a bite even in spring. As they walked through the corridor, the usual sea of phones, headphones, and blinking departure boards surrounded them. Ordinary chaos. But at the far end, next to Gate 17, stood a woman in slate gray coat, gloves in one hand, a manila folder in the other. She didn't hold a sign, didn't wave. She just watched Amira walk toward her like she'd known the shape of her soul since childhood. Ms. Dalton, the woman asked when they were face to face. Amira stopped. You must be Camille Rhodes. The woman gave a small nod. Professional, but not cold. Her eyes were focused and alert, but something behind them, grief, maybe softened the edges. You look tired, Camille said quietly. I'm sorry for why we're meeting like this, she said. But I'm not sorry that we are. They stood like that for a moment. 2 women, different battles, same war. Camille glanced at Jalen and Mira. Your children? Yes. They're welcome to join us in the lounge. I've reserved a private space. Amira hesitated. Will this take long? Camille looked her square in the eyes. This will take the rest of our lives. The private lounge was tucked behind frosted glass and rows of sleeping travelers. It smelled of citrus and overwaxed wood floors. Amira hated it instantly. Too clean, too perfect, like a place that had never known grief. Jalen sat with Mira near the corner, offering her his phone and letting her play a puzzle game. They spoke in quiet murmurs, siblings navigating a strange new chapter. Camille opened her folder. "I've been tracking suppressed approval letters for years," she began. "But your case, it's the one that threads them all together." Amira folded her arms. "Because of Terrence. Because of what was done after he died." Camille laid out a paper. It wasn't the letter Amira had found. It was an email, internal, between two insurance agents, dated 2 weeks before the court hearing. It read, "If we sit on this Dalton override another 2 weeks, the timeline passes and the judge is forced to rule against it. After that, it's clean on our end." Amira stared. Something deep inside her, beyond pain, beyond rage, began to burn. "They planned it," she whispered. Camille nodded. "Not just yours. 24 other names. I have them all. Mostly lower income, mostly caregivers, mostly families of color." The fire rose. Amira stood. Her hands shook, but not from fear. Camille watched silently. "I can't go back to my life like this," Amira said. "Not after knowing. Not after holding my husband's hand through his last breath while someone was playing clock games on a letter." She paused. "But I'm not trying to be a symbol. I'm not some crusader." Camille nodded. "You don't need to be. You just need to tell the truth. Publicly." Amira turned. Her kids were giggling over the turtle game. She thought of Terrence, of the way he smiled, even when his legs shook too much to walk to the bathroom without help. He would have told her. The truth is never small, but it's always worth it. She turned back to Camille. "Then let's tell it." 2 hours later, they sat in a cafe near the terminal. Night had fallen outside. A soft rain whispered on the windows. Camille had connected them via video call to an investigative journalist, a woman named Layla Jenkins. Calm voice, eyes like a hawk, and a background of peeling wallpaper behind her webcam. Amira recounted the story, from the diagnosis, to the denied medications, to Terrence's slow decline, to the letter on the plane, to Silas's confession, to the email that proved the lie. And for the first time in years, someone wrote it down, word for word, and said, "This matters." When the call ended, Camille looked at Amira. "Are you okay?" "No," Amira said, "but I'm not quiet anymore." Meanwhile, back at Gate 17, a middle-aged flight attendant tapped her phone. She'd overheard the man in 5A earlier that day. She'd seen the woman in row 14 go pale when the turbulence hit, then come back with new fire. She'd watched the daughter sleeping against her, and the boy who looked like he'd aged a year mid-flight. Now she scrolled through Twitter and saw a post that stopped her cold. Breaking whistleblower. Lawyer Camille Rhodes confirms pattern of suppressed medical reversals tied to low-income families and terminal patients. First testimony expected tomorrow. A Dalton case. Chokes Whitaker files. The attendant blinked, looked up, and whispered, "It's starting." They said it would be a small hearing, just a preliminary session, just a fact-finding review, just a quiet testimony. But just had become the most dangerous word in Amira Dalton's vocabulary. Her husband had just needed a signature. Her children had just been overlooked. She had just been another widow no one expected to speak again. Now she was just the woman holding the truth. The courtroom was inside a federal building tucked away in lower Manhattan. Everything about it was sterile marble tiles, buzzing lights, guards who looked like they hadn't blinked in an hour. Camille walked beside her. Crisp suit, steady voice. "You'll be under oath," she said, "but you don't need to prove everything today. Just tell what happened to you." Amira nodded, eyes forward. Jalen and Mira weren't with her. Camille's office had arranged for them to stay with a family care assistant in a secure location. Jalen hadn't wanted to let go. Mira had cried, but Amira had kissed their foreheads and whispered, "What Mommy is doing is for you, even if you don't see it yet." When they called her name, Amira stood slowly. Every step toward that wooden chair felt like walking underwater. The courtroom wasn't full, just a judge, a few committee members, a stenographer, and 2 legal observers from the Department of Health and Human Services. But behind them, through the glass doors, were reporters, cameras, curious eyes, watching this soft-spoken woman in navy blue, hands steady, voice calm. She took the oath, sat down, and spoke. She told them about Terrence's first seizure, about how it had taken 6 hours for the ER to stabilize him, about the days when he couldn't remember Jalen's name, or would whisper, "Don't let the nurse take my legs." She told them about the insurance denials, about how she'd written appeal after appeal, how Terrence had started apologizing for being alive. She described the night he died, and how she'd held his hand until it was no longer warm. And then she pulled the folded letter from her purse, held it up, and said, "This was approved before he passed. It never reached us. It was intentionally delayed. And I found out on a plane, sitting beside the man who signed his case." No one interrupted. Not once. Even the judge leaned forward slightly, elbows on the bench, listening like a priest at confession. When Amira finished, she didn't cry. She simply looked down, folded the paper again, and said, "You may not know our names, but we live in every zip code you forget. We pay taxes, we hold hands in hospice, we show up, and we deserve better." Silence. Then thank you. "Ms. Dalton." And she stepped down. Outside, a dozen journalists surged forward. Camille blocked most of them. But one young reporter from a student newspaper shouted gently, "Ms. Dalton, what would you say to other families who lost someone like you?" Did Amira turned, paused, then said softly, "You're not crazy. You're not weak. And your grief isn't invisible." Then she walked. Later that night, the clip went viral. Not from any major network, but from a teenager in Oklahoma who posted, "My mom cried when this woman said grief isn't invisible. We lost my granddad last year. He got denied too. His name was Douglas. This is for you. Grandpa. Dalton case. Within hours." Dalton case was trending. By morning, congressional staffers were calling Camille nonstop. By noon, the White House had issued a statement. And by 3 p.m., Amira's photo was on the front page of 3 major news outlets, none of which had cared when she buried her husband. But visibility came with cost. 3 days later, Camille's office was hacked. Threatening voicemails followed. One man muttered about people who don't know their place. Another accused Amira of trying to profit off her husband's grave. Jalen found one of the hate emails by accident when checking his mom's laptop for homework. "Mom," he asked quietly, "do people really think you're lying?" Amira sighed. "People don't always attack what's false. Baby, sometimes they attack what they're afraid is true. The hardest part wasn't the media. It wasn't the trolls. It was Mira. She'd stopped sleeping. She wouldn't say why. Just curled up in bed and whispered, 'I don't like the cameras.' So Amira began reading to her again at night. Old books, soft stories, and in the pauses between pages, she whispered back. "I'll never let anyone hurt you." A week after the testimony, Amira got a call. Unknown number. She hesitated, then picked up. "Ms. Dalton?" the voice asked. "This is Dr. Javier Lung, Senior Director at St. Emmanuel's. I believe your husband was seen at our facility 2 years ago." Amira's chest went still. "Yes," the doctor cleared his throat. "We found something. In an internal audit, there were emails, calendar blocks, and 3 medical override documents that were scheduled for delivery, but held in pending status longer than protocol allows." Amira didn't breathe. He continued, "One of them had your husband's name on it. I wanted you to hear it directly," she whispered. "Why now?" He didn't have an answer, but Amira did, because truth doesn't expire. The next day, Camille arranged a meeting with a class action firm. 32 families had now stepped forward. Several had letters, 2 had recordings, and 1, a retired administrative assistant, had kept backup server files just in case someone ever asked. The system was cracking, but so was Amira. She sat in the meeting, hands in her lap, listening to families recount the same stories: lost fathers, rejected treatments, unexplained delays. She nodded, she wept, quietly, and she wrote every name down in a small blue notebook. After the meeting, Camille pulled her aside. "You don't have to keep doing this," she said gently. "You've already done enough." Amira looked at her. "I can stop," she said. "But if I do, someone else will bury a husband like I did, and never know why. I can't live with that." That night, she dreamed of Terence. He stood in the corner of their old kitchen, holding the kettle. "Do you remember," he said softly, "how I told you your silence was powerful?" Amira nodded. "Turns out," she whispered back, "it was your silence that moved the world." The envelope was thick, unmarked on the front, but official in every way that mattered. Cream-colored, embossed seal, no return address. Camille set it down in front of Amira like she was placing a scalpel on a table. "They want to talk to you," Camille said softly. "Off record first, then possibly public." Amira stared at the envelope. "Who is they?" Camille's jaw tightened. "Office of the Inspector General, Federal Watchdog Agency. They've opened a preliminary investigation into regulatory obstruction. The Dalton case is now part of it." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Amira said, "If I go in, do I testify again?" "You don't testify yet." Camille said, "You explain. You present evidence, and they decide if this becomes criminal. And if I don't, they may still pursue it. But the media narrative will shift, and families might lose momentum." Amira leaned back, folding her arms across her chest. "So it's not just about what I say. It's how I say it." "Yes." Amira stared out the window, where New York's skyline glittered like teeth in the dark. That night, Mira had another nightmare. This one louder than the others. Screaming this time. Jalen ran to his sister's room first. Amira followed. Mira sat bolt upright, sweat in her curls, eyes wide. "Ah, shh, shh," Amira whispered, cradling her. "It's okay. You're safe." "No, I'm not." Mira cried into her chest. "The TV said your name again. It said you were going to court again. What if they take you away?" Amira froze. Jalen looked over, eyes wide. "I don't want them to take you, like they took Daddy." Mira sobbed. Amira held her tighter. "Oh, baby, they're not taking me. I'm going, on purpose, to tell the truth." "But what if they don't believe you?" Mira whispered. Amira swallowed. "Then I'll keep telling it, until they do." The next morning, she opened the envelope. It contained 2 pages. One was a formal letter requesting her presence at an internal OIG briefing. The other was a list of names, all people whose final medical orders had been delayed under questionable timing. Terrence Dalton was third from the top. Amira counted 37 names, 37 people with families, stories, and unfinished ends. At the bottom of the page was a handwritten note. "We believe your voice is essential, but your safety is also our concern. Discretion advised. D. Collier." Senior investigator Mira turned to Camille. "Do they mean witness protection?" Camille shook her head. "No, but they mean don't underestimate the stakes." A few days later, Amira met the man who signed that letter, Daniel Collier, a man in his 50s, former prosecutor, now running internal ethics reviews for government healthcare divisions. His handshake was firm, but his eyes were tired. "You're brave to come," he said. "I didn't come to be brave." Amira replied, "I came because my husband died before his medicine reached the mailbox." He nodded once, then turned on the screen behind him. It showed a timeline, one that looked disturbingly familiar. Terrence's case, the override date, the delay, the rejection. Then Collier said, "What you don't see is the third-party contract signed 2 days before that rejection. A consulting firm linked to a senior executive's spouse. That contract included performance bonuses based on claims budget reductions." Amira's chest tightened. "You're saying someone benefited from my husband dying?" Collier looked at her carefully. "I'm saying the math doesn't lie, and I need someone who lived that math to speak plainly for the record." After the meeting, Amira didn't cry. She walked outside, sat on the courthouse steps, and watched pigeons fight over a pretzel. She called Camille. "Put me on whatever list you need to," she said. "They want a record. I'll give them a record." "Are you sure?" "No," Amira whispered. "But I'm awake now. That's more dangerous than sure." That night, Jalen knocked on her door. He was holding a tablet. "I saw something," he said. "You need to see it." He played a video. It was Elise Whitaker, Silas Whitaker's daughter, the woman whose father collapsed next to Amira on the plane. She stood at a podium, giving a press statement. "My father was part of the system that failed people," she said. "But he also died trying to change it. The Dalton family. They saved his life, and now I want to help honor theirs." Amira sat up straighter. Elise continued, "I'm pledging all personal proceeds from my father's estate settlement to fund legal aid for the families impacted by the Dalton list. And I ask every corporate executive watching this if your conscience keeps you up at night. Don't wait until your heart does too." Jalen stared at the screen, then turned to his mom. "Do you trust her?" he asked. Amira paused. "I trust that she lost someone, too. And grief is a language we all understand, even if we speak it differently." 2 days later, a subpoena arrived. This time, not for Amira. For the medical group CEO who had authorized the pause on Terrence's override. The case was now officially criminal, and Camille's phone rang off the hook. But Amira, she was home, sitting at the kitchen table, helping Mira write a letter to her dad. A letter that ended with "Mom says the truth is a slow train. But I think it's like a song. It stays in the air, even after the sound stops." That night, Amira placed the letter next to Terrence's photo. She looked at his smile, then whispered, "I'm still singing. Love. I just hope someone's listening." The envelope arrived on a Wednesday. No return address, no postmark. Just a single word typed on the front, "Dalton." Amira found it wedged between a grocery flyer and a coupon booklet. folded so tightly it could have been missed. The paper was heavier than usual, the kind used in internal memos or legal files. She didn't open it in the kitchen. She waited until Mira and Jalen had gone to bed, tucked beneath their weighted blankets and whispered prayers. Only then, beneath the yellow light of the living room lamp, did she slit the top open. Inside was a photocopy. It looked like a scheduling memo. Nothing dramatic, but one name leapt from the page: Dr. Samuel Klein. Claims oversight scheduling coordination. Remote approval authorization code. L6 hold Q. Dalton. Terrence. Her stomach dropped. There it was. The actual hold order. Not speculation. Not rumor. A direct line between a real person and the decision that delayed Terrence's treatment. In the corner of the page, someone had written in tiny pen, "Check the flagged Q at Optivia Care." Amira exhaled slowly, then froze, because at the bottom was one final line: "Be careful who you trust. Not all allies are honest." The next day, she brought the document to Camille. Camille scanned it, her lips pressed into a sharp line. "I've seen this format before. These don't go public unless there's a leak. Is it real?" Camille nodded slowly. "Oh, it's real. The paper type, the clearance code, even the doctor. Dr. Klein retired last year after a medical leave." Amira leaned in. "What's Optivia Care?" Camille sighed. "Private contract firm. They process claims for multiple healthcare providers, including the network that handled Terrence's case. Can we subpoena them? Not yet, but we can send a data preservation notice." Amira swallowed. What if someone inside is trying to help? But afraid Camille raised an eyebrow. "Then you may be more valuable than we thought, or more exposed." That night, Amira locked every door. Twice. She lay awake listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the occasional car on the street, Mira's soft breathing through the baby monitor. Jalen had left his door cracked open again. He was too old for nightlights now, but not too old to feel fear clawing under his skin. At 2:14 a.m., Amira got up, paced the hallway, and opened her laptop. She searched Optivia Care whistleblower. Dalton flagged Q, no results. She tried Samuel Klein, hold order Medicare denial, still nothing. But in a buried link at the bottom of a healthcare blog, she found a 2-line comment under a forgotten post. "If you lost someone between 2021 and 2023, don't trust Q. L6. People disappeared there. User Morning Dove Oro 3. She emailed Camille at 3:05 a.m. Do you know this handle? Morning Dove Oro 3. Camille responded within minutes. We've seen that user before. DOJ flagged them once for insider tips that proved accurate. They went silent in October. Until now, Amira's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then she typed, "Then we follow the breadcrumb." By sunrise. Camille had made a call. By noon. They were sitting in a secured conference room with a data engineer named Lena Kim, a federal subcontractor. Lena pulled up a projection screen and began navigating a system that looked more complex than air traffic control. "This is what an approval queue looks like," she explained. Each case moves through 5 steps. Flagged queues, like L6, are where they hold or escalate claims without full denial until someone decides. Decides what Amira asked: who lives, who doesn't, who gets care, who doesn't. Amira felt bile rise. Terrence's name appeared on screen, and so did 18 others flagged under L6. But Lena's cursor hovered over one more name. Jalen Dalton, pediatric support referral, L6, pending never closed. Amira's body locked. "My son was in this queue." Lena's voice shook. "It looks like a pre-auth from years ago physical therapy, but it was flagged and never processed. That means someone, somewhere." was watching even then. Amira stood up, hands flat on the table. Then they don't just know me. They know my kids. Later, at home. She sat Jalen down. You were in a system you didn't even know existed, she said gently. And I didn't know either. I'm sorry. Jalen was quiet. Then he said, So, someone didn't want me to get help. She nodded. He stared at the floor. Does that mean I'm not safe now? Amira paused, then said, It means we tell the truth louder. It means we don't get scared into silence. Jalen didn't respond right away. Then he whispered, Okay, then I'll help you speak. That weekend, Mira found a note in the mailbox. She brought it to Amira with both hands, wide-eyed. This one wasn't typed. It was handwritten. Simple, uneven pen strokes. Don't stop. You're closer than you think. Someone on the inside is helping you. But hurry optics are shifting. Someone's scared. There was no signature, no return address, no stamp. Amira held it in shaking fingers, then whispered to herself, Someone's watching, but someone's rooting for us, too. The next day, Camille received a legal document, a preservation request filed by a congressional oversight subcommittee. It included terms like targeted denial pattern, malicious delay schemes, and intentional algorithm bias. This was no longer just a human story. It was becoming federal pattern exposure. But that meant risk. Real risk. Amira met Camille at her office, sat down across from her. Do I need security? Camille didn't blink. I've already hired it. That night, Mira had no nightmares. But Amira did. She dreamed of Terrence again. This time, he was writing something on the wall of a hospital room. She walked closer. The words weren't visible, only the sound of chalk. Then he turned and said, You're almost there. Ami, but truth costs something. Are you ready to pay? She woke with her heart pounding and whispered into the stillness, Yes. In the sterile chill of a private federal lab, Amira stood before a wall of monitors. It felt more like a war room than a data center. Each screen flashed names, codes, metrics, decision trees. Doctor? Javier Leung stepped forward, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. We didn't realize how complex the algorithm had become, he said quietly. Or how detached. Detached, Amira echoed. He nodded. It doesn't see patience. It sees probability weight. She swallowed, and my husband Leung pressed a few keys. A screen changed. A profile appeared. Dalton. Terrence. Age 42. Cardiac failure. Risk medical cost estimate. 118,900 life expectancy adjustment. 24 months flagged L6. Delay. A review. Amira read it twice. Her eyes burned. This system calculated he wasn't worth saving. Leung didn't respond, because she wasn't wrong. Amira sat in the back of the room, hands clasped, legs shaking. Camille placed a hand on her shoulder. You okay, no? Amira whispered. But I need to keep reading. Leung projected a visual flowchart. At the center was a black hexagon labeled Risk-Adjusted Outcome Filter, Rayoff 3A Chilling Term, Clinical, Cold. Beneath it, thousands of dotted lines branched off. Names, categories, age brackets, expense profiles. Camille read aloud. Built to maximize systemic efficiency through outcome forecasting. She looked at Leung. This is a denial machine. Leung's face was grave. It was originally built to flag fraud, but someone reprogrammed it for cost containment. Quietly. Who? Amira asked. Leung hesitated, then answered, It wasn't one person. It was culture. That night, Amira sat in her car outside the courthouse parking lot, engine off, rain tapping the windshield. Jalen had gone to a friend's house. Mira was asleep on Camille's sofa. She was alone and angry. Not loud anger, but the kind that hollowed you out and then filled the space with fire. She remembered the insurance call after Terrence's final hospitalization. The woman had said calmly, "We're working on getting the approval pushed through. Hang tight, hang tight." Like his lungs weren't collapsing. Like they hadn't already waited 16 days. Now she knew why. He was processed through a machine. A machine that valued savings over seconds. A machine that saw her husband as a line item. The next morning, she demanded access, not to the software, but to the training documents. And there it was. Line 14. Paragraph 3. Flag L6 categories for resource rationalization when projected. Kyo quality adjusted life expectancy is below benchmark threshold. Terrence's name. Again, this time not on a document, just inside it. And she whispered, "You weren't sick to them. You were expensive." Camille drove her to the river later that evening. "Why here?" Amira asked. Camille opened her trunk, took out a box. Inside 17 letters, all from families who had written to Amira since the hearing. Many had lost someone too. They read them, out loud, one by one. A veteran, a mother of twins, a foster teen, a school principal. Every one of them denied, delayed, discarded. Not because they lied, but because a system calculated they didn't matter enough. Later, as the sky turned orange, Amira looked out over the water. "You ever wonder," she asked softly, "how many people we never hear about?" Camille nodded. "They disappear into spreadsheets." Amira clenched her fists. "I want to speak their names." Camille smiled, then pulled a flash drive from her coat. "And now, you can." The following Monday, Amira appeared on 60 Minutes, not in a studio, not on a panel, but alone, sitting in her kitchen, apron still folded over a chair, coffee on the counter behind her. They asked why risk speaking out again. She answered, "Because people died quietly, and I refused to let them be forgotten silently." Then she read their names, every single one from the L6 queue. Her voice cracked twice, but she didn't stop. Later that night, the hashtag trended. Say their care. It was followed by a flood of stories, photos, scans, voicemails, mothers, fathers, teens, veterans, teachers, truck drivers, dancers, all flagged, all filtered by a system that never once heard a heartbeat. The pressure built fast. Within 48 hours, a UP senator requested a public audit of Optivia and its subsidiaries. By day 5, Optivia's CEO resigned. By day 7, Morning Dove 03 posted one more message. Truth is not viral. It is slow and bruised and brave, but it always finds breath. Amira saw it and cried for the first time in weeks, but it wasn't over. A week later, her doorbell rang. She opened it to find a stranger in a navy coat. "Are you Amira Dalton?" "Yes." He handed her a plain white envelope. Inside was a lawsuit filed against her by a former executive named Edward H. Green, a man who had authorized the original ROF 3 structure. He claimed defamation, damages, breach of confidential knowledge. Amira read it slowly, then looked up at Camille, who had arrived moments later. "This is retaliation," Amira whispered. Camille nodded. "They're trying to bury you in paper." Amira's hands didn't shake. She slid the letter across the table and said, "Then let them see what a nurse does with paperwork." It began, not with sirens or shouting, but with an envelope, a white one, stamped, sealed, delivered with surgical precision, inside legal jargon, intimidating formatting, And one name in bold, Edward H. Green, former executive director. Optivia Systems. He was suing Amira Dalton for defamation, reputational harm, and breach of ethical nondisclosure. Amira sat at her kitchen table, the document in front of her like a loaded weapon. Across from her, Camille scanned every line, and then she said, in a voice sharpened by trial scars, "This isn't a lawsuit. This is a warning shot, a scare tactic." Amira breathed in through her nose, held it, let it go. "Then they're about to find out I'm not easily scared." At 9:42 a.m. the next morning, Camille filed a countersuit, public interest defense, retaliatory litigation claim, and most notably a motion to compel discovery on the RAOF3 algorithm. Edward Green, once a ghost in the background, now had to face public scrutiny. But Amira knew what that meant. She wasn't just suing an executive, she was suing an entire corporate culture. 3 days later, it began. Deposition Day 1, held in a stark white conference room in downtown Atlanta. Amira wore a soft gray blazer. No makeup, just lip balm and quiet resolve. Across from her sat Edward Green, tall, wealthy, polished, the kind of man whose voice always felt like a closing statement. He barely looked at her until the recorder clicked on. Then she saw it, the flicker in his eyes. Recognition, not of her face, but of her willingness to stay seated under pressure. Camille led the questioning. "Mr. Green, were you aware of the implementation of RAOF3 in 2021? Yes. And were you part of the team that approved its cost-based outcome model? I was part of a group that reviewed risk mitigation strategies." Camille raised an eyebrow. Did that include weighing lives against costs? Edward adjusted his tie. "We don't see it that way." Amira leaned forward, finally speaking. "Then how do you see it?" Edward blinked. "I see it as data science, and I see it as my husband," she said softly. "Dead." The silence in the room after that was long and real. Edward cleared his throat. "I understand your grief, Miss Dalton." She nodded. "But do you understand accountability?" she asked, later that night. Amira sat with Mira, braiding her daughter's hair while the girl hummed softly to herself. Jalen was in the kitchen, writing an op-ed draft he'd been asked to publish in the student newspaper. "Mom," Mira asked quietly, "why do grown-ups lie?" Amira paused mid-braid. "What do you mean?" "Sweetheart, I heard that man on the news. He said he didn't hurt Daddy, but his computer did." Amira closed her eyes. "He's trying to make the machine sound like magic," she said softly. "But people built it, and people chose to use it. That's still a choice." Mira nodded, slow and thoughtful, then asked, "So if we tell the truth, does that fix the machine?" Amira kissed the top of her head. "No, baby, but it makes sure the next one is built better." The next day, a surprise visitor arrived at Camille's office. Layla Jenkins, the investigative journalist. She held up her phone. "I have a leak," she said. "From inside Optivia." A voice recording, short but devastating. "If this Dalton case goes public, kill the RAF line from marketing, redirect all QAL projections to the tech side, and reframe as efficiency strategy. We do not discuss mortality metrics in press statements." "Understood." Camille stared at the screen. "This is Coordinated Spin." Layla nodded. "I can publish this tonight. But Amira, I need your permission. It'll make things messy." Amira leaned forward. "Messy is where the truth lives." That night, the story dropped. The headline burned through news feeds. Audio leak reveals. Corporate death algorithm spin. Optivia execs ordered to suppress patient risk data, the internet caught fire, and the next day, so did Capitol Hill. Senators from both parties issued a joint subpoena to compel Optivia's board to testify. But before they could appear, Edward Green filed a restraining order against Amira Dalton. Claiming her presence posed a threat to procedural integrity, Camille laughed. Out loud. You're not a threat. Amira, you're a mirror. They just don't like what they see. Amira was tired of rooms that smelled like legal pads and ego, of headlines that spun pain into profit, of people asking, "Are you sure you want to keep pushing?" But she didn't stop, because in her bedroom drawer was a Post-it note, the last thing Terrence had written before his final hospital stay. Don't stop. You matter. Even if they act like you don't. The first court date was set. Public interest litigation. Live-streamed. Cameras. Commentators. Amira would be the first witness. Layla texted her that morning. They'll try to dress you in pity. Wear your power instead. She did. A navy blouse. No jewelry. And a silver watch. Terrence's old one. She took the stand, raised her hand, swore her oath, and looked directly at the judge. I'm not here as a grieving widow, she said calmly. I'm here as a citizen, asking if the machine that let my husband die should exist. Not just for me, but for everyone watching who doesn't know their name might be in a queue. The judge didn't interrupt. Neither did Edward's lawyers. Because sometimes the quietest voice lands the loudest blow. They told her courtrooms were quiet places, but on the morning of the third hearing, the room buzzed like a live wire. Reporters, protesters, law clerks with too many files, and a camera in the back corner, red light blinking like a silent sentinel. Amira sat near the front, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her eyes fixed on the judge, but her heart anchored to Terrence's watch on her wrist. Today wasn't just about testimony. It was about exposure and endurance. The judge, a firm, calm woman named Han. Justice Daria Moen adjusted her glasses as she called for the next witness. Camille stood. We call Elise Whitaker. A hush fell. Silas Whitaker's daughter. No longer just a name on a birth certificate. She walked forward slowly, wearing a simple black dress. No frills, no PR polish. Just a woman burdened with a name and a choice. Ms. Whitaker. Camille began gently. You're here as the biological daughter of Silas Whitaker. Correct. Yes. And did your father work with Optivia's legal or board advisory panels during his tenure? Yes, for over 7 years. And did he ever express concern about the ROF algorithm? Elise hesitated, looked down at her hands, then said quietly, he didn't just express concern. He tried to dismantle it. Gas rippled through the courtroom. Camille nodded slowly. Can you explain? Elise swallowed hard. My father, before his stroke, before the flight, had been preparing an internal report, a whistleblower dossier. She reached into her coat pocket, held up a flash drive, and I have it. The room exploded, not with noise but with attention, the kind that sharpens. Edward Green, sitting with his legal team, suddenly leaned forward, his face pale, jaw tight. Camille's voice remained calm. What's on the drive? Elise's eyes burned. Not with anger, but with grief. Names, patient cues, executives who overrode care recommendations to maintain profit margins, including Edward Green's email authorizing the suppression of what they called negative yield lives. The judge raised a hand. I'll admit the flash drive into sealed evidence. Court will recess for 40 minutes for preliminary review. Amira sat frozen. not in fear, but in clarity. Silas, the man she'd saved mid-flight, had never been just a retired judge. He had been trying to warn the world, and his daughter had just brought the match to the courtroom's oxygen. Back in session, the judge didn't waste time. She turned to Edward's lead attorney. "I've reviewed enough. Your client will be required to respond to the following claims under sworn oath." She listed them: fraud, malfeasance, suppression of whistleblower reports. Camille stood again. "One more witness." "Your Honor." The judge nodded, and then Amira walked forward. The courtroom didn't blink, but Amira's voice did. It cracked. Halfway through the sentence, "I was a nurse. I still am. My job was to assess wounds, not profit." She steadied herself. "I'm not here because I hate a system. I'm here because that system decided my husband wasn't worth 16 more days." She turned slowly, not to the judge, not to the lawyers, but to the gallery, the camera, to the people who had been denied, delayed, dismissed. "You're not numbers. You're not cost lines. You're lives. And someone needs to say that in a room like this where they measure everything but human weight." When she stepped down, the room didn't clap. It just breathed, deeply, slowly, sharply. Outside, protesters stood in silence, holding printed photos of family members who had died under similar denials. Their signs read, "I'm not a code, I'm his daughter." Delayed dignified. They chose profit. We paid with time. And in the middle of the crowd, someone had written in bold, black ink, "The courtroom didn't blink, but we will never look away again." That night, Camille and Amira met on the courthouse steps. "No ruling yet," Camille said. "But what you did in there." It echoed. Amira nodded, tired. She looked at the crowd, at Elise, standing with Jalen and Mira. Then she said softly, "Whatever comes next, I'm not alone anymore." Camille smiled. "No, you're not. It rained the morning the verdict came. Not a storm, not a downpour, just a quiet, steady mist, as if the sky knew it needed to wash something clean." Amira stood outside the courthouse with Camille. The final hearing was scheduled for 10 Mom. But they arrived an hour early. Not for strategy, but for stillness. Inside, the tension was paper thin. The judge took her seat without small talk. Glasses in one hand, gavel in the other. This court finds that the public interest outweighs all contractual confidentiality clauses, and that the plaintiff, Ms. Amira Dalton, has provided substantial evidence of systemic negligence tied to financial optimization models knowingly deployed by Optivia Systems. She paused. No one moved. The court hereby orders the immediate suspension of the ROOF algorithm, pending federal audit, and upholds Ms. Dalton's countersuit. Restitution will be paid to the Dalton family in the amount of $8.6 million. Additionally, all future algorithm-based approvals must include human oversight by licensed clinical personnel. Then she said one last line. "The law may lag behind technology, but the law serves people, not code." Silence again, and then quiet, tearless, profound relief. Camille squeezed Amira's hand. Elise closed her eyes, shoulders sinking with release. Jalen exhaled like he hadn't breathed in days. But it wasn't celebration. It wasn't vindication. It was something deeper. Closure, and the beginning of something new. Outside, reporters swarmed, but Amira didn't speak to the cameras. Instead, she turned to Camille. "I don't want a press conference." Camille raised an eyebrow. "No, I want a memorial." 2 weeks later, they held it at the community center where Terrence used to volunteer. It wasn't fancy. Just folding chairs, photos, candles, and soft piano music in the background. Mira sat with her sketchbook in her lap. Jalen stood at the podium, reading a letter he'd written. My dad wasn't a number. He wasn't a case file. He was a man who brought home Chinese takeout when Mom was too tired to cook, who danced badly in the kitchen, who helped me study for math tests when I cried over fractions. He looked up. We didn't win because we shouted. We won because we stayed. The flash drive Elise had brought to court. It was now part of a Federal Review Committee's archive. Lena Kim, the whistleblower known as Morning Dove 03, testified before Congress the following month. She credited Amira publicly and quietly sent a letter. Just one line. You lit the match. I'll keep the flame. Optivia. Still operational. But the CEO stepped down. Edward Green resigned, and their board was under constant scrutiny. A new department was created within HHS Human-Centered Algorithm Ethics Oversight. People started asking questions they hadn't dared before, and lives were saved because of it. Amira. She went back to work. Not full-time, not yet, but enough. She started training younger nurses on patient advocacy. Started a nonprofit with Camille called Stay in the Room, dedicated to helping families navigate corporate medical appeals. She didn't need to be loud. She just needed to stay. One evening, after dinner, Mira asked, "Are we okay now?" "Mom," Amira smiled. "We're not rich. We're not famous. But we're free, and that's better." Mira nodded. "Can we go visit Dad's tree again?" Amira took her hand. "Yes, let's go." They went to the park where Terrence's memorial tree stood. Beneath it, a bronze plaque. Terrence Dalton, father, mentor, fighter, never reduced. Jalen placed a small wooden box under it containing his op-ed, the court documents, and a photo of their family before the flight. Mira drew a picture of the plane, but in her drawing, the window showed not just clouds but faces, human ones. As they stood there, Camille arrived. Behind her, Layla Jenkins, Lena Kim, Elise Whitaker, even Judge Moen. One by one, they placed white stones at the tree's base. Silence, again. But not the same kind. This one had weight, memory, honor. And then Camille said something that echoed long after they left. Truth doesn't undo loss, but it builds something the world can't ignore. That night, Amira sat on the porch, Terrence's watch still on her wrist, Mira asleep on the couch, Jalen upstairs writing again, and in the distance the faint hum of a plane overhead. She looked up and whispered, "We stayed. Baby, we stayed." The courtroom had gone quiet, but the world outside had only begun to listen. In the weeks following the ruling, Amira found herself on a dozen lists she'd never asked to be on. Most courageous whistleblowers of the year, healthcare heroes in the age of algorithms, the woman who humbled a system. But none of it felt like celebration, because real change wasn't measured in magazine covers. It was in who kept their medication next month, who got a call back from their appeal letter, who didn't have to choose between groceries and insulin. She sat one morning at a folding table in a rented library room in Newark. 4 women sat across from her, all nurses, all exhausted, all scared. One of them, with gray at her temples and a wedding ring that looked too loose, asked, "What do we do when we're told not to document things that feel wrong?" Amira took a slow breath, then said softly, "You document anyway, in your own handwriting. You send it to your personal email. You write the date, and then you wait for the right moment. Not the safe one, the right one." The woman nodded and cried, not loudly, just enough to be seen. That's when Amira realized her real testimony wasn't in court. It was in rooms like this, small, tired, underpaid, where the war still whispered in paperwork. Jalen, meanwhile, had written his essay into a full speech. It went viral on a local education platform and was picked up by a youth civic organization. He'd titled it, "Stay in the Room, The Power of Not Walking Away." He was invited to read it at a city town hall. Afterward, a teacher came up to him and said, "You wrote about grief without making it look like weakness. You made me believe my son might survive losing his dad, too." Jalen said nothing. He just nodded. Camille's nonprofit with Amira. Stay in the Room grew fast. Too fast. They had to hire staff, case managers, legal interns. Even Elise joined, using her inheritance from Silas to fund pro bono patient advocacy software. "We can't undo the harm," she told the board, "but we can slow it down, we can interrupt it," and they did. Within 3 months, they helped 173 families reverse unjust care denials. But not everyone clapped. Optivia's new interim CEO made a public statement. "While we acknowledge the court's ruling, we caution against painting the healthcare algorithm industry with a single brushstroke. These tools save lives." Camille didn't bother responding publicly. Amira did, but quietly. She walked into a Senate hearing, sat next to a professor from Yale and a data ethics specialist from Seattle, and calmly explained, "Saving lives with tools is noble, but choosing which lives to save based on risk-revenue metrics isn't science. It's gambling with human time." The room didn't blink, but the country was starting to. One morning, Mira came into the kitchen wearing her dad's old hoodie. It drowned her frame, the sleeves dragging like seaweed. But she smiled anyway. "I dreamed he was clapping for me," she said. "At my piano recital." Amira stilled. "You want to take lessons again?" Mira nodded. Amira said yes, not because of the recital, but because her daughter finally wanted to be heard again. In April, Amira got a letter, handwritten, no return address, inside a single photo of a woman holding her father's medication bottle, now finally approved. On the back, "You don't know me, but your voice got my dad 3 more weeks. We spent them laughing. Thank you." Amira didn't know what to say, so she didn't say anything. She just placed the letter in Terrence's old coat pocket and hung it on the wall. A quiet shrine, a soft reminder. Later that month, Amira stood at the front of a university auditorium, guest speaker, not because she had a degree, but because she'd walked through fire without screaming. She stood still for a moment before beginning, and then said, "They told me I had a beautiful voice once, not because I sang. I never sang, but because I didn't raise it until it mattered." A silence fell, the kind that clears space. "Let me be clear. I'm not brave. I was angry. I was devastated. I wanted someone to fix it for me." She looked out, but no one was coming. "So I did the one thing they didn't expect me to do." She smiled. "I stayed. I stayed in the room. And when they called my husband a cost, I reminded them he was a father, a man, a life, not an algorithm's loss." The standing ovation lasted 4 minutes, but it wasn't for Amira. It was for every person who had ever been told to wait quietly and decided to stay anyway. That night, back home, Jalen made grilled cheese for dinner, burnt the corners, forgot the tomato soup, but Mira laughed like it was a Michelin meal. Amira watched them from the kitchen doorway. 2 children who had grown up too fast and somehow still believed in soft things. Outside, the wind picked up. Leaves rustled against the window pane, And from the distance always, somehow the echo of a jet overhead, Amira whispered to no one and everyone, the verdict wasn't the end. But this peace, that's what we fought for months. Amira said no to interviews, not because she had nothing to say, but because the microphones wanted her outrage, not her clarity. Do you think the healthcare system is evil? Do you feel you were targeted because you're black? Would you advise other nurses to sue? They asked the same 3 questions in different suits, on different stations, with different smiles, but none of them asked what mattered. What did it cost to stay human in the middle of all this? So Amira stayed silent, not out of fear, out of purpose. Because sometimes, silence is not retreat, it's control. Meanwhile, the system adapted, but not always in ways that helped. Optivia rebranded their algorithm under a new name, Harmon IQ. They claimed it was ethically refined, equity-centered, and tested by patient experience professionals. Camille rolled her eyes. You can rename a wolf. It still eats the same. Behind the scenes, Elise filed a formal ethics complaint against Optivia's new board. The legal team prepared for another slow battle. But Amira wasn't waiting anymore. She was building. One room, one table, one voice at a time. In Baltimore, she helped establish a small network of care navigators, former nurses, social workers, and medical students trained to intervene before patients reached the crisis point. They didn't promise miracles. They offered presence. And for many families, that was more than any hotline ever had. One afternoon, Amira met a mother named Jocelyn, 33, recently divorced, son with epilepsy. Medicaid appeal denied 4 times. Jocelyn sat across the table, hands trembling, eyes darting between paperwork and her phone. They said his risk score was too unstable, that the model predicted, "Now you're there, halt, me, poor long-term ROI." She looked up. Do you know what it's like to read that your child isn't worth the investment? Amira didn't flinch. Yes. Then she gently pushed forward a single-page guide Camille had created, How to Stay in the Room. Jocelyn took it like it was oxygen. Later that night, Amira sat at her kitchen table, rereading Jocelyn's case. Mira was asleep on the couch, a flashlight still clutched in her hand from reading comics under a blanket. Jalen was upstairs, headphones on, editing his next video essay. The house was quiet, but not empty. And for the first time in months, Amira let the tears come. Quiet ones, the kind that needed no witness, only release, because helping others didn't erase the grief. The grief had settled in her body like old music, no longer loud, but unforgettable. She missed Terrence every morning, missed his laugh, his questions about her day, his presence in the kitchen, always just slightly off rhythm when he danced. But grief had also sharpened her. It had burned off the pieces of her that once asked for permission. Now, she simply acted, not impulsively, but precisely. In June, Amira was invited to a private summit on healthcare equity in D.C., doctors, policymakers, ethicists, and one empty seat reserved for her. When she arrived, the moderator offered her the floor with a rehearsed smile. Ms. Dalton, we'd love for you to open with a reflection on what justice looked like for you. Amira adjusted the mic, then said softly, Justice is never a moment. It's a pattern, a heartbeat. It repeats not once, but every time someone refuses to disappear. A hush settled over the room. Afterward, a quiet man in glasses, Dr. Naeem Choudhury, a medical data scientist, approached her. I've been studying the models Optivia uses. They've made surface changes, but the underlying logic is the same. Amira raised an eyebrow. He offered a folder. We've mapped the bias. We can prove it in code. She took the file. Let's make sure silence doesn't protect them again. In Newark, Camille met with Amira and Elise in her office. The mood was shifting, not celebratory focused. Camille laid out 3 documents. 1. A proposal to present the new findings before a federal digital health commission. A draft of a coalition letter to HHS. 3. An early plan to build a public database where patients could report algorithm-based denials. They want to keep everything behind corporate walls, Camille said. We're going to build windows. Elise smirked. Windows? Let's build floodlights. But the pushback came fast. Within days, Camille's nonprofit received a cease and desist letter from Optivia's legal counsel, claiming unauthorized use of proprietary model terminology and reputational harm. Camille posted it on their website with a single caption. We're not afraid of your language. We're fluent in truth. Amira, meanwhile, was invited to speak at Mira's elementary school for Career Day. She almost declined. Too busy. Too tired. But Mira begged. So she came. She wore her old scrub top, brought no slides, no flash, just herself. She stood before a room of squirming 7-year-olds and said, I used to fix hearts. Then I helped people fight when theirs were broken. But mostly, I just listen now. A little girl in the back raised her hand. Are you a superhero? Amira smiled. No, I'm just a person who stayed. Later that week, Camille called. Urgent. They've offered a settlement. Quiet. No court. No media. Amira's voice stayed even. How much? 8 million? With NDAs. And the algorithms still live. Still renamed. Amira was quiet. Camille knew what that meant. So we keep going. We stay in the room. That night, Amira walked into Jalen's room. He was editing his new video. Healthcare isn't a spreadsheet. What my mom taught me. She sat beside him. Are you scared? She asked. He paused. A little, but less when I see you. She kissed his forehead. Then we're doing it right. There's a cost to being seen. Even once. Amira knew that now. It began with a single segment on public radio, an afternoon piece about data ethics, with just 3 minutes devoted to the Newark case, a clipped voice from the host. And joining us is Amira Dalton, the nurse whose quiet courage helped spark federal review. 3 minutes. That was all it took. By morning, her inbox had over 200 emails. Not press inquiries, not corporate threats, stories from strangers. A man from Missouri wrote, They said my mother's dialysis wasn't cost-efficient. We buried her before we got a response. I'm not asking for justice. Just thank you for not being quiet. A teenager from Atlanta. They told my dad he should prepare for hospice, but he's still walking. We fought the denial. Because we heard about you, a retired surgeon. I built the system that now excludes people like my sister. I'm ashamed, and I want to help. Amira sat in her living room that evening with Jalen. She handed him her phone, scrolling through the messages. These are all because of you, he whispered. She shook her head. They're not because of me. They're because someone saw one person push back and realized they could, too. He looked down. Do you ever wish you stayed quiet? She paused. Then every day. For 5 seconds. Then I remember what silence costs. The exposure grew. A video podcast. A university case study. A local mural of Mira's drawing titled People Are Not Codes. And finally, an invitation from The Atlantic. A profile piece. Amira almost declined. Until Elise texted her a photo A waiting room bulletin board with a pinned-up article about algorithm bias. This story won't tell itself. Elise wrote, but it might save someone we'll never meet. Amira agreed. But she had one condition. No glamour. No savior edits. I want them to see me burned out. Still cooking rice at 9 p.m., still crying quietly some nights, still standing. The journalist, a woman named Tasha Williams, agreed. What followed was not just an article. It was a mirror, held to a nation pretending that bureaucracy is neutral. Weeks later, the article was published, The Nurse Who Refused to Be Quiet. It opened with a single line. She didn't raise her voice. She raised a mirror. Back in Newark. Amira went grocery shopping. 2 people recognized her. One stared, then looked away. One approached, gently, with a whisper. I don't want a picture. Just wanted to say you helped my cousin win his appeal. Amira nodded, then walked to the bread aisle and exhaled slowly. Because even kindness, when constant, was heavy. One afternoon, Camille and Lena met Amira at a quiet cafe outside the city. Camille brought updates. Federal hearings are expanding. 3 more whistleblowers are stepping forward. Lena added, and we've found the flaw in the rebranded algorithm. It's buried under a proxy variable patient adherence estimation. Basically, it punishes people for being too poor to follow treatment plans exactly. Amira's jaw tensed. So they're still calling poverty a pre-existing condition. Camille's eyes narrowed, and still claiming it's just math. Back home, Mira had a school project, real-life heroes. She wrote about her mom. But when Amira read the draft, she noticed something unexpected. My mom is not brave because she fought. She's brave because she kept tucking us in while fighting. Amira folded the paper and cried again, because being seen is a double-edged thing. It opens doors, but it also leaves you open to scrutiny, to projection, to distortion. Amira missed the anonymity, missed being someone who could just cry in her car without imagining someone recording it. Still, something had shifted. People stopped asking her to scream. They started listening to her silence. They respected the pauses in her sentences, the weight they carried. She didn't have to fight to be heard anymore. She just had to speak. One evening, Amira sat with Camille and Jalen, reviewing data from a new patient reporting tool they'd launched. Camille grinned. We just passed 1,000 reports logged, and 37 reversals confirmed. Jalen tilted his head. That's 37 families who get more time. Amira nodded, then whispered, and none of them had to scream to get it. But visibility also attracted predators. 2 media outlets twisted her story into a partisan healthcare debate. An online influencer accused her of being paid opposition by Big Pharma. Amira didn't reply. But the next morning, she found her front fence tagged in chalk. Go back to saving lives, not ruining systems. She stared at it and waited. Jalen came outside and saw it too. Do you want me to erase it? Amira knelt beside him. No, not yet. Why? She touched the letters. Because it means we're still pushing something that needs to be pushed. That night, Amira pulled out her old nursing bag. From the pocket, she retrieved her first ID badge, worn, bent, still holding her photo from 17 years ago. She looked at the younger version of herself, eyes wide, smile hesitant, hopeful. She whispered to it, You didn't know what you'd walk into, but you stayed. And now, they see you, across town. Elise met with Dr. Naeem Chowdhury and Lena. They finalized a white paper exposing continued algorithmic bias. Naeem, soft-spoken as always, said Amira gave us the courage. Now we give her the math. They plan to release it publicly the following week, with real names, real code, no redactions. And back in Mira's bedroom, a nightlight glowed. She had drawn a new picture, a nurse, a scale, a heart, and above it, in crayon, people are not numbers. Mira tucked her daughter in, lingered for a moment, and whispered, "One day, this world will be softer. But until then, we make each other strong." Mira nodded, eyes already fluttering shut. Because to be seen even once by someone who matters, that is enough to keep going. The first time Amira saw her face on television, it wasn't a segment she had approved. It was a panel show, 5 voices, none of whom had ever worked a 12-hour ER shift, debating whether Amira Dalton had overstepped her role. She's a nurse, not a policy expert. Is this hero worship or just strategic victim marketing? Where's the line between advocacy and activism? Let's not forget. Folks, algorithms don't discriminate people. Program them. Amira stared at the screen in her kitchen. The host smiled between interruptions. A chyron below read nurse or narrator. The face of a healthcare controversy. Jalen muted it. They don't even know you. Amira shook her head. They don't want to. They want someone to perform their story, not tell the real one. Outside, the neighborhood shifted. A few neighbors stopped waving. At the pharmacy, the tech whispered, "I liked you better when you were just a nurse." And one day, a man stood outside her gate, holding a sign that said data. Emotion. She didn't speak to him, just called Camille, who forwarded the footage to local police. Meanwhile, Optivia doubled down. They launched an aggressive PR campaign, ads with soft piano music and testimonials from satisfied families. Optivia didn't just give us care. They gave us a plan. Their CEO, Edward Green, appeared on Bloomberg. "We respect all feedback. But let's be clear. Our models are saving thousands. Isolated incidents shouldn't derail innovation." Amira watched the clip in silence. Elise gritted her teeth. "They're turning your warning into a branding opportunity." But the real pain came from within. One night, Amira received a message from an old colleague, Sharon, a fellow nurse, trusted, quiet strength. Her message was brief. "I love what you're doing, but you've made us a target. Admin's pressuring the ER staff not to discuss patient scores anymore. We're getting blamed for speaking up." Amira closed her laptop slowly. Her chest felt like it was folding in. She didn't reply for hours. Instead, she sat on her porch. Mira curled beside her, asleep in a blanket. The night was cool, quiet, but her mind wasn't. Was she helping or just stirring chaos? What if her fight was making life harder for people still inside the system? What if, in shining a light, she'd drawn fire on people who didn't ask for it? Jalen came out with 2 mugs of tea. He sat beside her. "You okay?" She hesitated. Then, softly, "I'm not sure anymore. What if I've done more harm than good?" Jalen stared at the sky for a moment, then said, "You didn't light the fire. You just made people see it." But the doubt lingered. The next day, Amira visited Sharon in person. They met in the back corner of a bookstore cafe. Sharon looked exhausted. 3 of us were written up for discussing care plans too openly. They're watching us now. Amira's throat tightened. "I never meant for you to be hurt in this." Sharon nodded. "I know, but truth isn't free. Amira, it never was. That's why so few pay for it." Camille, sensing Amira's exhaustion, suggested a short break, a weekend away. No interviews, no hearings, just air. But Amira declined. Rest isn't safety. Not yet. Not while they're still hiding behind numbers. Later that week, a high school invited her to speak at their debate team conference. It wasn't press. It was 16-year-olds in dress shirts and borrowed heels, arguing about ethics. Amira said yes. She wore no makeup, no speech, just honesty. A student raised her hand. What do you think scares these companies the most? Amira smiled gently. People who don't need to be loud to be powerful. The room went still. One boy nodded slowly. Like you. She paused. Like you, if you keep listening. On the way home, Amira found her inbox flooded again. Not hate mail this time, but a single subject line, repeated over 30 times I heard you, and tucked between them, one message from an unfamiliar name. From Elisha North Starbio. Org subject. The algorithm's skeleton. I'm a data engineer. The code you saw. It's not the only one. I've archived versions of the original mortality filter Optivia used before rebranding. It's worse than you know. Can we talk? Amira forwarded the message to Camille. Within minutes, Camille replied. If it's real, this could reopen the case. We'll need secure review and protection. Amira stared at her screen. Suddenly, the echo chamber felt more like a hallway, one that led somewhere darker than they'd ever expected. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she walked into Mira's room, sat on the floor, watched her daughter's slow, steady breathing, then whispered to the dark, I just wanted to be a nurse. I didn't ask to carry all this. But silence answered, as it always did, not to punish, to wait. Because in that space, Amira found her answer. She hadn't asked for the burden, but she had accepted it. And now, she'd carry it not as punishment, but as proof that someone still cared enough to carry anything at all. It began with a midnight video call. Camille had arranged the security layer encrypted line, two-factor ID, IP masking. Amira had only ever used FaceTime and hospital Zoom. This felt like something from a spy film. Ready? Camille asked. Amira nodded once. The screen flickered, and then Elisha Gray appeared. He looked younger than Amira expected. Early 30s, faded sweatshirt, eyes that had clearly stopped sleeping like the rest of the world. His voice, when he spoke, was gentle, almost apologetic. I'm not a hero. I just kept the receipts. Camille opened the meeting with protocol, non-disclosure boundaries, chain of custody agreements. But Amira interrupted, quietly. Why now? Elisha blinked, then looked directly at her. Because I watched my mother get denied care 2 years ago. She died because some formula said she wouldn't last. I didn't know, at the time, that I was working on the very system that buried her. Amira inhaled sharply. He continued, when Optivia rebranded the algorithm, they didn't rewrite it. They buried it. I've tracked every iteration. I can show exactly when and how they hard-coded biases into proxy fields, and worse, how they built legal insulation around it. He shared his screen, rows of code, color-coded annotations, timestamps, audit trails, this field, here treatment, adherence, penalty. Sounds clinical, right, but in practice, it punished patients who missed appointments even if the reason was lack of transport, unstable housing, or mental health struggles. Camille leaned in. You have evidence of deployment. Elisha nodded. I have server logs, usage reports, and emails, from leadership saying it's more cost-efficient to code patient attrition into care models. Amira swallowed hard. This wasn't negligence. It was design. Elisha sent a zipped file titled Skeleton V1. Whistle packet, then sat back. I know I'll never work in biotech again, but I couldn't look away anymore. I saw what you did. Ms. Dalton, you didn't scream. You documented, and it gave me courage. When the call ended, Camille slumped in her chair. This could unravel the whole sector. Amira didn't speak for a long time. Then quietly, or bury him before anyone listens. That night, she dreamed of rooms with no windows, clinical voices, cold metal, patients filed into boxes labeled survivable and manageable loss. She woke up shaking. By morning, Camille had activated legal channels. A redacted version of the leak would be submitted to the Federal Ethics Committee under whistleblower protection. Lena cross-referenced Elisha's files with her own back-end engineering reports. "Well, it checks out," she confirmed. He was inside, deep inside. Amira asked her, "Why didn't you leave?" Lena hesitated. "Because sometimes being inside the system is the only way to dismantle it, piece by piece. But things moved fast. Too fast. By Thursday, someone had leaked a fragment of Elisha's data. Not the full truth, just enough to confuse the public. Blogs and social media began debating data sabotage and revenge engineering. The narrative began to shift. Was this whistleblower acting alone? Could this be deepfake code? Is there a personal vendetta against Optivia? Amira felt the ground tilt. Again, she texted Elisha, "I'm sorry. This is my fault." He replied, "It's not." This was coming either way. The only question was who would be brave enough to light the match. Meanwhile, Jalen came home from school with a bruised cheek. A kid had shoved him in the hallway. Your mom's making everything harder for people who follow the rules. Jalen didn't tell Amira right away. She found out when she noticed him icing his face quietly in the kitchen. When she asked, his voice cracked. I didn't fight back, because I thought, maybe they're right. She knelt down, held his face in her hands. No, baby, they're afraid. Because for once, someone who looks like us is holding the flashlight. That weekend, a package arrived at their door. No return address. Inside shredded paper and a single envelope. 1 page. Typed. No signature. You don't know how far this goes. Stop now. Your kids won't be protected forever. Amira stared at it. The weight of the paper felt colder than anything she'd ever held. Camille filed it with the Department of Justice. Lena enhanced the image for trace metadata. Standard burner printer. No way to trace it back. And yet, Amira did not retreat. Instead, she did something she hadn't done in years. She wrote a letter to her late husband. She folded herself into the smallest chair in the house. Mira's and started with shaky hands. Terrence, I never imagined this. I became a nurse to help people. Quietly. I didn't want to be a symbol. I wanted to be someone's steady hands when the world was shaking. Now my hands are shaking, too. But I can't stop. Not when our daughter is drawing pictures about justice. Not when our son is bruised but unbroken. Not when strangers are whispering thank you across time zones. You once told me, courage isn't always loud. It's sometimes the voice that whispers, do it again tomorrow. So here I am, whispering back, I will. Love. Amira, she folded the page, placed it in her drawer. Not to send, just to remember. Because when you carry a skeleton key, you don't just unlock the truth. You unlock the fear inside you and decide to walk through anyway. It didn't hit Amira all at once. It arrived in fragments. A forwarded video, a clipped quote, a headline that said too little. Then came the first national segment aired at 8:12 p.m. Eastern, the anchor. Polished and practiced. Looked straight into the camera. A nurse, a whistleblower, and a leaked algorithm. Tonight. What happens when care becomes code, and the code decides who lives? They played Amira's voice. The clip was from her original deposition. Raw, quiet, unflinching. They didn't die because of fate. They died because someone fed the system a lie and called it logic. Jalen was on the couch next to her. He exhaled. "You sound like one of those movie monologues." Amira smiled faintly. "I wasn't acting." But outside their home, the world began acting and reacting. The next morning, news vans lined the street. Her neighbor, Mr. Keller, called through the fence. "You've got people walking up with mics. Amira, you want me to send 'em off." She thanked him and closed her gate. Mira peeked through the blinds. "Why do they care now?" Mama Amira paused. "Because it's finally louder than what they were trying not to hear." Camille called at noon. "Elisha's full packet has been verified by 2 independent labs. It's going public. This is it." Amira leaned against the fridge. "Are you ready?" Camille laughed. "You're the one they'll talk about. I just filed the forms." But Amira knew better. The center of a storm isn't the loudest place. It's the stillest. And right now, her silence carried more weight than any sound. The online world split open. Systemic. Silence began trending. So did Nurse Not Algorithm and Who Deserves to Live. But not everyone clapped. There were skeptics, there were trolls, and there were deeply scared people who clung to structure even if it had failed them. An op-ed circulated titled, "We Need Order, Not Emotion. Why Algorithms Keep Healthcare." Afloat, Amira read every line. Her hands did not shake, her breath did not stutter, but her chest, oh, it ached. Because nowhere in that article was the word mother, or daughter, or goodbye. Only efficiency, only resource allocation, only predictive fairness. That night, Amira found Mira asleep with one of her old nursing textbooks. Inside, the child had tucked a hand-drawn picture. A hospital bed, a figure holding another's hand, and 3 words, spelled carefully in pink crayon. "Let them live." The following morning, Amira received an invitation. It came from the White House Office of Digital Ethics, an upcoming summit, healthcare and AI regulation, risk, and redemption. They wanted her voice, her story, her presence. You would be the keynote. Amira reread the email, then closed her laptop. She went to the bathroom mirror, stared at her own eyes. They looked older than she remembered. Not broken, just widened by seeing too much, she whispered. "Who are you now?" And the mirror, of course, had no answer. Jalen found her minutes later. "Mom." She turned, drying her eyes. "Yeah, baby, I know they want you to go speak at that thing." She nodded. "Should I?" Jalen shrugged, then said something he hadn't in months. "You don't need a stage to be loud, but maybe the stage needs you." That afternoon, she walked into Camille's office. "Tell them I'll do it, but I'm not reading from anyone's script." Camille grinned. Wouldn't expect anything less. Days passed, then a week. The final wave hit a Senate Oversight Committee had opened a formal investigation into Optivia and all its AI subsidiary partnerships. Lena was summoned for testimony. Elisha was placed under federal witness protection. And Amira, she stood in her backyard under a winter sky, watching Mira and Jalen build a snow fort, and wondered, what would her own mother say now? She sat that night and wrote a second letter, not to Terrence, but to herself. You are not a fluke. You are not a flared moment soon to fade. You are the daughter of women who bled in silence. You are the mother of a girl who dreams out loud. You carry the middle, the weight, the tension, the fire, and you are shaping it into something future children might not have to carry. That is not noise. That is music the world forgot how to hear. When she folded the letter and placed it in the same drawer as the first, she didn't cry. She didn't need to. Some griefs harden into clarity. Some battles aren't about winning. They're about never again letting the wrong side claim victory by default. They flew her in on a government jet. No fanfare. No public announcement. Just a folder marked Dalton. Amira, Healthcare AI Panel, clearance level. 3 inside were her credentials, hotel keycard, and an optional pre-written speech. Optional. She smiled at that. Camille met her on the tarmac. You're scheduled to speak third. You'll follow the Stanford ethics chair and the CEO of MedLogic AI. Amira raised an eyebrow. And precede who, a senator from Pennsylvania and a human AI integration futurist? Camille smirked. I looked him up. His last book was titled The Algorithm Will Love You Now. Amira exhaled slowly. This is theater. It's Washington. The summit was held in a glass-paneled building with rooftop solar tiles and a lobby filled with holographic displays. The sign read, AI in Healthcare. Navigating the Future with Conscience. Amira almost laughed, as if Conscience had just been late to the meeting and needed to catch up. Backstage. A woman with a Bluetooth headset approached her. Hi, Dalton. Just confirming no slides, no visuals. Correct. Amira nodded. Just me. The woman blinked. You'll be the only one. Are you sure you don't want to? Just me, Amira repeated, calm. The woman nodded and walked off. Before her segment, she watched as the MedLogic CEO took the stage. He was polished, confident, performed concern like a trained pianist. At MedLogic, we believe AI must augment empathy, never replace it. We remain committed to data integrity, patient dignity, and algorithmic transparency. Applause followed. But no one asked how many lines of code in his platform were proprietary, or how many patients had become anomalies in a system that couldn't explain itself. When it was her turn, the crowd shifted, quietly. Some knew her, some didn't, but all could feel that this next speaker was not here to dazzle. Amira stood in front of the podium, looked out at the sea of government badges, tech lanyards, and clinical suits, and then she stepped to the side of the podium. No mic stand, no prompt, just her. I am a mother. I am a nurse. I am someone who held the hands of people whose names never made it onto the priority list. She paused. And I am tired of listening to experts defend systems that have never once stayed up all night with a dying patient. The room held its breath. She continued, we are not opposed to progress, but we are terrified of unaccountable automation wrapped in words like efficiency. I have seen people denied care because a spreadsheet said they wouldn't survive long enough to matter. My own husband died waiting for approval. My children nearly lost their mother trying to save someone else's father. And still, some of you will walk out of here today believing that this is about isolated incidents. It's not. It's about culture. And culture is code. Silence. Then a question from a panel moderator, a man in a blue suit with a voice that was too smooth to trust. Missy Dalton. Do you think it's fair to say that some patient triage is necessary in a world with finite resources? Amira didn't flinch. Necessary, perhaps, but designed to exclude without appeal. No, when a system refuses to explain itself, it's not science. It's a shield, and people die behind it. Applause broke out. Not polite, real. But behind her, on the giant screen broadcasting live reactions, a different kind of text was trending. Amira Dalton, AI heretic or healthcare hero. She saw it. Let it be. After the panel. She stepped off stage and was immediately approached by a man in a gray blazer. His badge read, Gregory Langston, U.S. Health Tech Compliance Office. Ms. Dalton, your remarks were powerful, but I have to ask, do you have concrete proof of this algorithmic discrimination before she could speak? Camille stepped between them. We've submitted over 700 pages of evidence, plus whistleblower testimonies. If you're looking for deniability, Mr. Langston, I'd suggest reviewing your inbox. They walked away. Camille turned to her. They're not just scared. They're exposed. Now they're playing defense. Amira looked out at the conference floor. I wasn't here to fight. You didn't. You told the truth. That evening, in her hotel room, Amira received a text from Alicia. You lit the match. I'll keep the fire going. Then another from Lena. Just testified. They didn't blink, but they didn't look away either. We're getting closer. She looked out the window. The city lights glimmered like a nervous heartbeat. Behind her, Jalen's voice came through FaceTime. Mama. Mira made a poster. It says no more silent deaths. She wants to hang it at school. Amira smiled. She can. And tell her she gets it from you. The next morning, she boarded her return flight. Not first class. Not business. Just row 22. Middle seat. Between a woman in a suit and a man in sweats. No one recognized her. No one spoke. And that, somehow, was the most peaceful silence she'd known in months. Until the captain made an announcement. Folks, today's in-flight reading is a little different. We're highlighting a speech by someone who reminds us all that humanity must come first, even at 30,000 feet. Amira froze. The woman beside her looked up from her magazine. You heard about that nurse who took on the system, she asked. That's the kind of woman I'd follow into a fire. Amira smiled, faintly, and looked out the window. Some revolutions don't start with fire. They start with a hand that refuses to let go of another, even when the world says let them die. 6 months later, the terminal felt different. Not just because the sky was clear or the carpets were newer, but because Amira walked through it as someone the world had finally decided to see. Mira held her hand tightly. Jalen, now taller than her, pushed the carry-on bag with quiet pride. They weren't boarding a plane this time. They were walking into a press conference. The Department of Health and Human Services had just released its final report. Title, Artificial Intelligence in Clinical Decision-Making Failures, Accountability, and a Path Forward. The subheading, Informed by testimony from Amira Dalton and over 3,200 healthcare workers. She hadn't read all 314 pages, but Camille had, and when they met that morning, she handed Amira a sticky note marked page 3, paragraph 2. It read, The Dalton Amendment. No algorithm used in healthcare may render life-limiting decisions without a mandatory human override and patient appeal. Amira had to sit down when she read it, not because she felt weak, but because for the first time in years, she felt light. The press conference was crowded. Lights, lenses, lapel mics. But Amira didn't flinch. She stood behind the podium, and without notes, spoke the way she always had, with clarity and care. I didn't want to become a name. People Googled. I wanted to be the nurse you trusted in the worst hour of your life. And I still do. This change didn't come because the system corrected itself. It came because people refused to be invisible any longer. Afterward, a young mother approached her, with tears in her eyes. She whispered, My daughter got her treatment last week because they reviewed her case manually this time. She showed Amira a photo of the little girl, smiling with a shaved head and a glitter-covered IV line. Thank you. Amira just held the woman's hand and whispered back, That's who it was always for. Later that week, Camille handed Amira a manila envelope. Inside a fellowship offer from Yale School of Public Health. They want you to teach ethics, systems reform, the real stuff no one talks about. Amira read the letter, then looked out the window of Camille's office, where children walked past holding protest signs and cotton candy a youth rally for ethical tech. She smiled. Let's teach them. Back at home, Mira hung a new drawing on the fridge. This one showed a giant hand holding 3 smaller ones, a nurse's hand, a child's hand, and an old man's. Above it, in bubble letters, "We protect each other." That night, Jalen sat on the porch, staring at the stars. You ever think about what it'd be like if we didn't get on that flight? Amira nodded slowly. Sometimes I think we'd still be okay, but the world wouldn't. Amira turned to look at him. You think we changed the world? Jalen shrugged, then smiled. Parts of it, the ones that needed it most. In the morning, she brewed coffee, signed forms, opened mail, but one envelope stood out. No return address. Inside, a hand-typed note. You did more than speak. You made us listen. I hope you know you saved more lives than you'll ever count. E.G. She placed it beside the photo of Terrence by the window and whispered, We made it, love, even if they tried to erase you. Weeks later, Amira stood in a quiet auditorium at Yale. She looked out at a new generation of students, diverse, curious, furious, brave. She began the lecture with no slides, just like she'd done at the summit. What do we owe each other? That's not just a question for ethics exams. It's the question that saves lives. She walked among them slowly. The code didn't fail. The people who wrote it did. But now, you get to write new code, one line at a time, one truth at a time. The applause wasn't loud. It was steady. And steady is how change happens. A year later, a bronze plaque appeared in the hallway of St. Elias Medical Center. It read, In honor of Amira Dalton and all those who refused to be silent. Underneath, smaller, Let no life be lost to silence again. And on the same day, somewhere in a quiet hospital in rural Georgia, a young resident flagged an AI-generated denial, stopped it, reviewed it manually, and called the family to say she's going to be okay. We caught it. Thanks to a policy called the Dalton Override, Amira Dalton didn't shout. She didn't sue. She didn't storm stages or beg to be seen. She simply told the truth. And that truth, backed by courage, loss, and relentless compassion, rippled through courts, codes, and communities until no one could ignore it anymore. She wasn't trying to change the world. She just refused to let another life be erased by silence. This isn't just a story about a nurse. It's about every unseen hand that holds someone up. Every mother who chooses dignity over rage. Every system that needs to be reminded it exists for people, not profit. As we close this chapter, ask yourself, what would you do if the life in front of you wasn't worth saving according to a screen? Discrimination doesn't always wear a uniform. Sometimes it hides in code. Let's never stop questioning it. If this story moved you, help us share it further. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel for more true, powerful stories that demand to be heard. Until next time, stay human, stay loud, stay kind.